It was the first song ever played on MTV, and it predicted everything that channel was about to do to the music world. The band behind it had one giant hit, then disappeared, though the men who made it went on to shape almost every major sound of the 1980s. This is the story of the one-hit wonder that changed pop music, then vanished forever. Two session musicians above a stonemason's shop. Trevor Horn was born in Hertfordshire, England, in 1949, and by his own account spent the 1970s playing bass every night of the week in house bands, session work, and touring jobs that kept him busy and kept the rent paid, but offered no particular path toward the kind of career he was quietly imagining. He played 5 nights a week with the Tony Evans Band at the Hammersmith Palais, picking up whatever session work came in during the days, and eventually landed a more prominent role as bass player and musical director for disco artist Tina Charles, whose 1976 single, I Love to Love, went to #1 in the UK. It was in that capacity, as a hired hand in someone else's band, that Horn first worked alongside a keyboardist named Jeff Downes. That working relationship was where the Buggles effectively began. Jeff Downes had grown up in Stockport and carried similar ambitions. A trained musician with a strong facility for the keyboard technology that was beginning to reshape popular music in the mid-1970s, and a conviction that something more was possible than what the session circuit offered. The two men began writing together and formed the Buggles in 1977, initially as a trio that also included guitarist Bruce Woolley, who had met Horn while both were playing at the Hammersmith Palais on separate occasions. All three contributed to what would become their signature song. Woolley developed the initial chorus riff that anchored the whole piece, and Horn later said the song would not have existed in the form it took without Woolley's contribution. But it was Horn and Downes who carried the band's identity forward after Woolley's eventual departure. The first recorded demo of Video Killed the Radio Star was made one afternoon in 1978 in Downes's flat, which sat above a monumental stonemason's shop in Wimbledon Park, London. The equipment was a Revox A77 reel-to-reel tape recorder. The three of them worked out the song's structure in roughly an hour and captured a rough version before the day was done. Horn has said that even in that early, unfinished state, there was something in the song that felt different from what they had been writing up to that point. A clarity of concept that made it stand apart from the rest of their material. The concept was drawn from multiple sources. Horn has cited the J.G. Ballard short story, The Sound Sweep, in which a mute boy vacuums up stray music in a world that has moved past it, discovering an opera singer who has hidden herself in a sewer rather than accept her irrelevance, as a key inspiration for the song's underlying theme. The broader idea that technology replaces one era's culture with another's, and that the things being replaced are mourned even as the new thing is embraced, was something both men found genuinely compelling rather than simply commercially useful. The song was not a joke or a novelty. It was an observation about what was already happening and what was clearly going to continue happening regardless of what anyone felt about it. The song that became a single, then a hit. Bruce Woolley left the group before recording began, departing to form his own band, the Camera Club, which would record its own version of Video Killed the Radio Star for their 1979 debut album English Garden, with a young Thomas Dolby on keyboards. The Woolley and Camera Club version came out as a single in June 1979, before the Buggles version was released, but it was a more conventional rock arrangement that did not generate significant chart action. Horn and Downes, now as a duo, began shopping the Buggles demo to record labels, and found the reception initially discouraging. Island Records, one of the labels they approached, reportedly turned them down 3 separate times before a deal was finally agreed. The turnaround coming after label founder Chris Blackwell personally heard the video demo and recognized something in it. The signing happened on a day when Horn and Downes had actually been scheduled to sign with another company entirely, the production firm connected to SARM East Studios. Blackwell's competing offer was substantial enough that the SARM deal was released, and the Buggles signed with Island. Recording for the debut single and the album that would contain it was split between 2 studios and involved 2 separate engineers. The foundational instrumental tracks, drums by Paul Robinson, horns bass, and Downes' keyboards, were recorded at Virgin's Townhouse in West London with engineer Hugh Padgham. The session was then carried to Sarm East Studios in Brick Lane, where engineer Gary Langan handled the vocal recording, additional overdubs, and the final mix. Langan later described working on the record as an exercise in being pushed constantly further than he had gone before. Horn's perfectionism on the mix was relentless, with particular obsession focused on the level of the bass drum, which Langan said was mixed to a level he had never heard before. The instrumentation leaned heavily on synthesizer technology that was at the cutting edge of what was commercially available in 1979. The Roland System 100, the ARP Odyssey, and a Roland TR-808 drum machine gave the recording its mechanical precision and electronic texture. The song also included a young Hans Zimmer in a supporting role. He assisted Horn and Downes with synthesizer programming on The Age of Plastic. The album the single would eventually anchor, appearing briefly in the final seconds of the music video. Video Killed the Radio Star was released as a single on September 7, 1979 by Island Records. It entered the UK singles chart at number 24 on September 29, jumped to number 6 the following week, and reached number 1 on October 20, 1979, making it the 444th number 1 in the UK chart's entire history. It topped the charts in 16 countries in total, including Australia, where it held the record for the country's best-selling single for 27 years. In 2022, the British phonographic industry certified the single platinum in the UK, based on combined sales and streaming figures reaching 600,000 units. In the United States, it reached only number 40 on the Billboard Hot 100, spending a single week at that position in December 1979, before fading without further chart presence, a result that would become historically ironic within 2 years. The debut album, The Age of Plastic, followed on January 10, 1980. It was a coherent and inventive piece of work, built on synth-pop production that was ahead of most of what the mainstream was doing at the time, and it sold respectably without approaching the chart dominance of its lead single. The album's other singles, Living in the Plastic Age and The Plastic Age, charted modestly in the UK but generated nothing close to the cultural footprint of Video Killed the Radio Star. A band that had arrived with such precision and force found that their second single never really answered the first, and the question of how they would sustain a commercial career moved quickly into the background as other events took over. The music video that changed television. The music video for Video Killed the Radio Star was directed by Russell Mulcahy, an Australian director who was beginning to build a reputation in the emerging world of promotional film clips, and who would go on to direct major videos for Duran Duran, Elton John, and many others throughout the 1980s, as well as the 1986 film Highlander. The video was produced on a budget of approximately $50,000 and shot in a single day. Its visual story follows a young girl sitting by a radio, the world of her parents' generation, whose experience is transformed by the arrival of the visual technology that is supplanting the audio-only culture she was raised within. The black and white footage of Horn singing into a vintage radio microphone, intercut with color footage of the gleaming, technological future he inhabits, was deliberately constructed to contrast the two eras the song was about. Virginia Hay, an actress and model who would later appear in the film Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, played the silver jumpsuited woman in the clear plastic tube. The radio explodes at the moment of the first chorus. The narrative's emotional weight, mourning for something that is being made obsolete, is carried entirely through the visual language rather than through any literal explanation, which is what gives the video its staying power across decades of repeated viewing. The video was broadcast on the BBC's Top of the Pops in 1979, rather than a live performance, which was itself relatively unusual at the time. It generated complaints from some viewers who found the exploding television set too violent for the program's family audience. The Buggles did not tour during this period in any sustained way. They made television appearances, but otherwise kept a low live profile that, in retrospect, suited the band's identity as a studio creation rather than a performing act. Then came August 1st, 1981. MTV launched in the United States at 12 o'clock on that date, and the first video the channel broadcast was "Video Killed the Radio Star." The decision had been made by MTV's programming team partly for its obvious symbolic appropriateness, a song mourning the replacement of radio by visual media, playing on a channel designed to do exactly that, and partly because it was simply a strong, arresting piece of video content that suited the channel's visual ambitions. The VJs who introduced it, Mark Goodman, Nina Blackwood, Alan Hunter, J.J. Jackson, and Martha Quinn, were themselves a new kind of media figure. People paid to appear on screen and talk about music rather than simply to play it. The channel's entire premise was a live demonstration of what the song had described 2 years earlier. In the United States, where the song had barely registered on the charts in 1979, record stores in areas served by MTV's initial cable coverage, which at launch reached only about 2.5 million homes in parts of New Jersey, New York, and a handful of other markets, began selling Buggles albums almost immediately. The channel was, from its first broadcast moment, doing what it would continue to do for years, selling records through visual exposure that radio alone couldn't create. The Buggles themselves had no active promotional campaign in place. The song simply existed, the channel had decided to use it, and the sales followed. The video became the 1 millionth video aired on MTV on February 27, 2000, a milestone the channel marked as a genuine anniversary, rather than a coincidence. When MTV's dedicated music-only spin-off channels in the UK and Europe shut down on December 31, 2025, they ended their final broadcast with "Video Killed the Radio Star" as a symbolic bookend. The same song that had opened MTV in 1981, closing its European chapter 44 years later. It had also served as the final video played on MTV Philippines in 2010, when that channel closed, and as the first video broadcast on MTV Classic in the United Kingdom, when that channel launched on March 1, 2010. No other recording in the history of music television has opened and closed as many chapters of the same story. The Buggles joined Yes. Then, everything changed. Horn and Downs released their debut album, The Age of Plastic, in January 1980. It was a coherent and inventive piece of work, built on synth-pop production that was ahead of most of what the mainstream was releasing, and it sold respectably without approaching the chart dominance of its lead single. The Buggles were now a known quantity, but the trajectory of a follow-up was unclear. What happened next was one of the more surreal episodes in rock history. Yes, the veteran progressive rock band found themselves without two of their founding members, singer John Anderson and keyboard player Rick Wakeman, and shared management with the Buggles. The decision was made to invite Horn and Downs to join Yes as replacements. Downs became their keyboardist. Horn became their lead singer, stepping into a role that John Anderson had occupied for over a decade, and that had become one of the most recognizable voices in progressive rock. They recorded the album Drama in 1980, and then embarked on a tour of the United States and Europe that played to mixed audience reactions. Some Yes fans were not remotely prepared for the change in personnel, and made their dissatisfaction known from the seats. We can't rewind, we've gone too far. Horn performed Yes material at Madison Square Garden and at other major venues, fronting one of the most famous bands in the world on the strength of 1 year's worth of rock celebrity. He has described the experience as genuinely strange, and as something that clarified rather than resolved his uncertainty about performing. His wife and manager Jill Sinclair eventually told him plainly that he was not frontman material, and that his real gifts lay in the studio rather than on the stage. Horn was reluctant to hear it, but acknowledged, over time, that she was right. By 1981, he had stepped back entirely from performing as a primary career, and turned his full attention toward production, a decision that would define the remainder of his professional life. The producer who built the 1980s sound. The transition happened quickly and produced immediate results. Horn completed a second Buggles album, Adventures in Modern Recording, largely on his own after Downes had departed to co-found Asia, the supergroup that also included Steve Howe and John Wetton from the wreckage of Yes, and which would go on to have its own substantial commercial run in the early 1980s. The second Buggles album was released in 1981 on EMI and found some audience in the Netherlands but generated minimal interest elsewhere. As a Buggles project, it was, in effect, the group's farewell, though Horn has never formally dissolved the name. In 1981, Jill Sinclair persuaded Horn to produce the British pop duo Dollar, a suggestion he received with considerable skepticism, telling her plainly that he had just been in Yes, and that producing Dollar felt like a significant step backward. Her response was that all he needed to do was write them a Buggles record and let them sing it. Horn did exactly that. His work with Dollar, particularly the singles Mirror Mirror and Handheld in Black and White, both of which reached the UK Top 20, deployed the same dense synthesizer production and precisely calibrated sonic architecture he had developed with the Buggles. Martin Fry, the singer for the Sheffield band ABC, heard what Horn had done for Dollar and approached him directly. The resulting album, The Lexicon of Love, released in 1982, became one of the most admired British pop albums of the decade, pairing orchestral arrangements by Anne Dudley with Horn's electronic production in a way that had almost no precedent in the mainstream. Horn won the 1983 Brit Award for British Producer of the Year for his work on it. That same year, he produced 90,125 for Yes, which generated Owner of a Lonely Heart, the band's only #1 single in the United States, built substantially around early digital sampling via the Fairlight CMI synthesizer. In 1983, Horn and Jill Sinclair purchased Basing Street Studios in Notting Hill and renamed it Sarm West Studios. With journalist Paul Morley, Horn also co-founded ZTT Records that year, a label that would sign Frankie Goes to Hollywood and mount one of the most scrutinized and discussed pop campaigns of the decade. Horn produced Relax, which the BBC banned for being too sexually explicit, generating the kind of attention that sent it to #1, followed by Two Tribes and the full album, Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. He then produced Grace Jones's Slave to the Rhythm, Malcolm McLaren's Duck Rock, and the Art of Noise albums that established electronic collage as a legitimate pop form. In the 1990s, he produced Seal's first 2 albums, including Kiss from a Rose, which won the Grammy Award for Record of the Year in 1996, giving Horn a second decade of landmark commercial achievements built on the same foundational approach he had developed in a flat above a stonemason's shop in Wimbledon Park. He was awarded the Ivor Novello Award for Outstanding Contribution to British Music in 2010. He has since produced or collaborated with Robbie Williams, Rod Stewart, Belle and Sebastian, Tina Turner, Simple Minds, and many others across a career that has never fully stopped. What the song actually predicted. Video Killed the Radio Star is a nostalgic song, but its nostalgia is complicated. The narrator mourns the radio age even while living inside the technological future that replaced it. The song doesn't celebrate the new world. It doesn't condemn it either. It simply accepts it as something that cannot be undone, noting that you can't rewind, that the distance has already been traveled. Horn has said the song came from a genuine feeling that something was on the verge of changing irrevocably. Video cassette recorders had just entered everyday life in British homes. Music videos were beginning to be made by artists who had previously communicated only through audio. The sense that image was about to become as important as sound in popular music, perhaps more important, was not a theoretical position for Horn, but an observation about what was already in motion around him every day. The song named that shift before anyone had a term for it, and before the infrastructure that would make it universal had been built. What nobody anticipated, including Horn and Downes, was that the song would function as a historical document as well as a pop record. Its placement as the first video on MTV transformed it from a smart piece of commentary into something closer to a founding text. It became the literal opening sentence of the MTV era, a piece of synchronicity so perfect that it seemed, in retrospect, to have been planned, even though it emerged entirely from circumstance. the channel's programmers choosing it because it was good, not because they knew it would later be considered prophetic. Horn has described the odd experience of watching a song he wrote as a young, broke session musician in a flat above a stonemason's shop become the recording most associated with the entire visual music revolution of the 1980s. A revolution that he then went on to help shape from behind the mixing desk, decade after decade. Working with artists who were themselves products of the world "video killed the radio star" had predicted. The Buggles, as a performing act, have appeared occasionally for reunion performances and anniversary events. And Horn continued performing the song live into the 2020s, including as part of Seal's touring band in 2023. But, as a chart act, the Buggles had one recording that mattered in the mainstream, and that one recording managed to become the opening frame of a new era in entertainment history. Most one-hit wonders leave behind a fond memory. This one left behind a timestamp on the moment everything changed. If this brought back the memory of the first time you heard that opening note, or learned something new about the story behind it, drop it in the comments. Hit like and subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from.